1936 Lincoln-Zephyr. Originally, the Zephyr was meant to be a budget-friendly sub-brand under Lincoln, kind of like how Cadillac had LaSalle. But something unexpected happened. Instead of just filling a gap in the lineup, the Lincoln-Zephyr became a breakout hit and quickly established itself as the heart of the Lincoln brand. For the mid-1930s, the Zephyr was ahead of its time. It featured unit body construction, Lincoln's first, and a compact 4.4-liter V12 engine, all wrapped in sleek aerodynamic styling. That was a bold move back then, especially considering how the radical Chrysler Airflow had flopped just a couple of years earlier in 1934. But Lincoln stuck to their vision, and it paid off. The timing also helped. America was still reeling from the Great Depression, and the Lincoln Zephyr offered a more practical and affordable option compared to the big, luxurious Lincoln Model K. It hit the sweet spot, luxury feel, modern design, but at a more approachable price. In fact, in its very first year on the market, the Zephyr made up about 80% of Lincoln's total sales. After World War II, the Zephyr name was quietly dropped, but the car itself continued on and essentially became the backbone of Lincoln's lineup through 1948. It's a classic example of how a car originally designed to be the affordable one ended up steering the entire brand in a new direction. 1956 Continental Mark II. Back in the 1950s, Ford set out to build what it hoped would be the finest personal luxury car in the world. The result? The 1956 Continental Mark II, a direct spiritual successor to the original Lincoln Continental, which had been inspired by Edsel Ford and introduced back in 1940. The Mark II made its grand debut in Paris, of all places, and it stood in stark contrast to the flashy American cars of the era. There were no towering tail fins, no over-the-top chrome. Instead, this car carried a refined, understated elegance that felt more European, though Lincoln preferred to call it Continental. Sold under its own standalone Continental brand, but through Lincoln dealerships, the Mark II was more than just a car. It was a statement. It was largely hand-built, featuring fine imported Scottish leather on the seats, a deep, multi-layered hand-rubbed lacquer finish, and just about every luxury feature Ford could dream up. The only option? Air conditioning. Now, the price tag was steep, $9,960 at the time, which would be roughly $102,000 in today's money. And even at that premium, Ford reportedly lost about $1,000 on each unit they sold, simply due to how labor-intensive the production was. In total, just over 3,000 Continental Mark IIs were produced during their short 2-year run. But in that time, the car attracted some serious star power. Owners included Frank Sinatra, President Dwight Eisenhower, Elvis Presley, and Nelson Rockefeller. The Mark II wasn't just luxury, it was luxury with pedigree. 1961 Lincoln Continental. After 3 straight years of painfully gaudy designs, Lincoln finally turned a corner. In 1961, they introduced one of the most beautiful and iconic luxury cars in automotive history, the Lincoln Continental. With its long, low stance, squared-off lines, and a clean, de-chromed look, the 1961 Continental rejected every styling cliché of the 1950s. And just like that, its longtime rival Cadillac suddenly looked like a holdover from a bygone era. Lincoln offered the car in both 4-door sedan and 4-door convertible version. Both came with those distinctive rear-hinged back doors, better known as suicide doors. It was a bold design choice, but it worked. And with the stylish Kennedy family entering the White House, it felt like the perfect symbol of a new era. America was embracing fresh design, youthful energy, and modern elegance. And the 61 Lincoln fit right in. In fact, the first family made it their official presidential limousine. Tragically, that very car would later become part of one of the darkest chapters in American history. But just like Jackie Kennedy herself, the Continental carried on. It endured and over time became an icon of early 1960s design, forever remembered as a symbol of grace, tragedy, and timeless style. 68 Lincoln Mark III. We went back and forth on whether the Continental Mark III belonged on this list. After all, it was basically the grand marshal of Lincoln's 15-year-long parade of oversized, floaty land yachts. But from a business standpoint, this car was a home run. At the time, the Lincoln Mercury division was bleeding money. That's when Lee Iacocca, who was then Ford's executive vice president in charge of cars and trucks, stepped in. His directive was blunt: put a Rolls-Royce grille on a Thunderbird. And with that one sentence, the blueprint for the Mark III was born, a personal luxury coupe built on a budget. Lincoln's big picture goal was to outsell Cadillac's Eldorado, and the Mark III did just that in its very first year. According to Iacocca himself, $2,000 of the Mark III's $6,585 sticker price was pure profit. Just one model turned the struggling Lincoln Mercury division into Ford's biggest moneymaker. Now, the Mark III didn't break new ground technologically. It wasn't innovative, but it was bold, powerful, and undeniably stylish. Under the hood, it packed a massive 7.5-liter V8, cranking out a jaw-dropping 500 pound-feet of torque. Despite weighing in at around 2.5 tons, Motor Trend clocked it from 0 to 60 in just 8.6 seconds. Impressive for the era. The Mark III marked a turning point for Lincoln. Without it, the brand might not have made it to its 50th anniversary, let alone still be around to celebrate its 100th. 84 Lincoln Mark VII LSC. During the 1970s, Lincoln made a fortune selling massive, chrome-laden land yachts to a loyal group of more traditional buyers. But when the Mark VII luxury sport coupe rolled out, it marked a bold shift in direction. This car was sleek, smaller in size, and far more aerodynamic, totally unlike the oversized boats Lincoln had become known for. And instead of flashy chrome, it used trim sparingly, giving it a clean, modern look. Underneath, it shared the Fox platform with the Ford Mustang. But Lincoln went a step further by adding electronic air suspension. The goal was to balance smooth luxury with a touch of legitimate handling ability, without sacrificing that classic Lincoln ride comfort. As the years went on, Lincoln quietly started boosting the Mark VII's performance. The original 4.9-liter V8 made around 140 horsepower, but by the time they dropped in the high-output Mustang GT engine, it was putting out 225 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. The LSC version also made a few smart interior changes, ditching digital readouts in favor of classic analog gauges, and it was the very first American car to offer four-wheel anti-lock brakes, which was a big deal at the time. By the late 1980s, the Mark VII LSC had built a name for itself. It wasn't just a soft luxury cruiser. It had earned real respect as a legit sports sedan. No, it didn't exactly outrun the Germans, but it could absolutely hold its own. 1990 Lincoln Town Car. The 1990 Lincoln Town Car, which took home Motor Trend's Car of the Year award that same year, was a bit of a surprise. Proof of what could happen when fresh engineering and design were applied to a very traditional way of driving. Built on the old Panther platform, which was already showing its age back then, the new Town Car still had all the hallmarks of a classic Lincoln. It was big, quiet, buttery smooth, and luxuriously soft on the road. But this wasn't just a rehash of a 1970s land yacht. Lincoln gave it a sleek aerodynamic makeover, added speed-sensitive steering, and even tightened up the suspension just enough to give it some real road manners. It still floated down the highway like a proper luxury car, but now it had a little more poise and confidence behind the wheel. The only thing missing was a more modern powertrain. That came just a year later in 1991, when Lincoln dropped in a 4.6-liter overhead cam V8 engine. It was the finishing touch the car needed. The result? A Lincoln that wasn't just for retirees or folks who carried photo albums of their grandkids in their wallets. This town car helped bridge the generation gap. It was classy, comfortable, and genuinely appealing to a much wider group of luxury buyers. 1993 Lincoln Mark VIII. While the earlier Mark VII had to grow into its identity as Lincoln's forward-thinking luxury coupe, the Mark VIII didn't waste any time. It hit the scene with confidence and style, ditching the Continental prefix and making a bold first impression. Its sleek, rounded design was a total departure from Lincoln's boxy past and turned heads the moment it rolled onto the street. Inside, it felt just as fresh, with a modern, sweeping dashboard that skipped the traditional wood trim for a clean, contemporary look. Under the hood, Lincoln brought serious firepower. It was powered by a cutting-edge 32-valve dual overhead cam V8 that reviewers at the time raved about. In fact, in Motor Trend's December 1992 issue, they described the Mark VIII as moving down the road like a fast freight locomotive on velvet rails, which pretty much sums up the experience. Despite tipping the scales at around 3750, the Mark VIII could sprint from 0 to 60 in just over 7 seconds, and it handled with the kind of poise you'd expect from a proper sports sedan. If the 1990 Town Car was Lincoln's nod to tradition with a modern twist, then the Mark VIII was something else entirely. It looked and felt like the future, and for a moment it seemed like Lincoln was ready to lead the way there.